Hello, everybody. Hi, Julia.
Oh, greetings, good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Hello, hello. How is everybody doing?
Fairly asleep.
Indeed. On this beautiful last day of June. I almost said January. Wow.
It's one of those J months.
Yeah.
Yeah, heading into the July 4th weekend in the US, so I think a lot of people are checked out already.
Oh, yeah. Especially post-conference week. Yeah.
Hey everyone, happy to be here.
Hello. Is this your first work group meeting?
Yeah, it is.
Cool, cool. Well, welcome. When we officially kick off, we'd love to have you do a quick intro.
Sweet. Sounds good.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, David.
Hey, and I see Jacques is
I just
here.
noticed, Amir, that you're trying to talk.
What's
We
up?
can hear Amir. If you can't hear Amir, then there's a problem with your audio.
Am I the only person who can't hear?
I hear Amir.
Yes. Hello, hello, hello. Testing.
Amir, I hear you. And
All
hopefully
right.
people hear David, me too.
Yes, from
It happens.
All right. All right. I am entering my name and such into the document, which I think is the same one we're all using. I'm going to
Yep.
post the link to the URL of the thing I think we're using for our meeting notes for the day.
Thank you, David, as always.
All right. Jacques, I see you.
You got me there twice now.
Well, we want to, oh yes, you're right. Well, you're very important.
I mean, there's another Jacques Chester in Florida who's a real estate agent. It could be him.
Could be. That
Some
would
might
be
say that Jacques is critical.
Ooh.
Certainly makes me feel more secure to hear that.
Ah. It's not getting, the material's not getting better.
we could have had a stand-up comedy routine at the summit. Come on.
Just a pun off, a pun down.
Amir, we missed an opportunity there. We
Yeah.
should've just like spoken only in puns.
I think Taylor from CNCF would win that, though.
He would have
Hidden
had
I've
to
had a
learn
conversation
now.
with him. His puns are, they
On
keep
point.
coming. Yeah, and they are on point.
I used to be in a team, though, 4 of us who liked puns, and like stand-ups blew out every morning because we were just standing there trading.
I'm pretty sure I had an entire meeting based off of like vegetable puns. I don't know why, but it was lovely and productive.
So not very crisp, though.
No, definitely need to be more fresh.
Love it. Love it.
I need the cymbal sound here.
Sad trombone.
That too. All
Well,
right.
as we do, we can give it another minute, 5 minutes past the hour to officially kick off. I don't know if I have ability to record. Thank you, Michael.
Should. If you don't,
It's already recording.
Oh, it
Okay.
is. Excellent.
Yep, it is recording.
We are
Confirmed.
in fact recording. Awesome.
All righty.
Okay, well, it's just about 5 minutes past. So hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining on this last day of June. Very excited to have you all here today. Jeff couldn't make it today, so I'll be facilitating. We've got some couple things on the agenda. As always, we like to start with new faces, and I know we have at least one. And we'd love to hear from folks who, if this is either your first time or one of your first meetings, to introduce yourself, kind of what interested you about this work group, and yeah, anything of that nature. So I'll start off with Chapman, who is it is his first meeting here today.
Great, thank you. Hey, my name is Chapman Pindry. I work at Bloomberg. I'm on the foundational infrastructure team, providing infrastructure for securing like SBOMs and CVE scanning. In my free time, I'm a pretty active contributor to Encore's products, so like Sift and Gripe. Yeah, I'm just trying to be a fly on the wall. I'm going to attend all of the working group meetings just to get a feel for OpenSSF and kind of, where I could fit in best, but just hoping to be here and learn.
Awesome, welcome. I had the pleasure of meeting some of your Bloomberg colleagues in Austin, and so yeah, they're great folks you got over there. Very lively group.
Yeah, definitely.
Welcome.
Yes, welcome. Do we have anybody else that would like to go? Okay, yeah, it looks like everyone here looks familiar. So yes, again, thank you again for joining. First thing I just threw on the agenda is just a quick OpenSSF Day recap from last week. I thought it went really well. Julia, Caleb, and I had the opportunity to speak a little bit about kind of the hard problem we're trying to solve here in the working group. And I got to say, throughout the week, I did get a lot of positive feedback on the panel discussion. So thank you everyone who was a part of that and helped out with that. And yeah, I thought the rest of OpenSSF Day went well too. We heard from Michael Scavetta talking about Alpha Omega, and a lot of other great talks too on that day and throughout the week in Austin. So if you didn't get a chance to be there, I believe most of the sessions are going up in a couple of weeks. Does that sound right?
Actually, this is David Wheeler. I just had a conversation. We're going to try to accelerate getting the videos up. It takes them a little while because they record them in big blocks, and then they want to put out the videos for one for each speaker. But we're going to try to accelerate that because so many people really wanted to hear some of the things that were said. So I know for at least OpenSSF Day, we're going to try to get it sooner. I don't know if we're going to be able to get all the other talks quite that quickly. And I certainly want to get, as soon as Jacques put videos up, I would love to link to it. But and Jacques gave a great talk about selecting critical projects and so on. So it was not just the how to do, but the alternatives, what's the pros and cons, and just really did a nice job of wandering down the various alternatives and the pros and cons, and for our particular situation, what he thinks would be the best, which it was a very, very well thought out. So excellent. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah,
I appreciate
yes,
that.
Absolutely. That was a nice talk, and I'm looking forward to seeing Julia's talk as well. I heard some good feedback on that one, and sadly it was at the exact same time that I was talking, so could not be in two places at once. But that's the beauty of recordings, right? So hopefully we'll see those soon. And yeah, again, great job to everybody, and thank you to everyone who participated. And yeah, hopefully by the next meeting or two, those links will be up. So all right. So, and then we have, as we typically do, kind of our projects and SIG and related updates. If we'd like, we could jump right into Jacques' topic as kind of like the meat of today's meeting, and then we can go over all of the related updates and whatever else we need to do towards the end, if that sounds good with you, Jacques, and everyone else in the work group.
I mean, I'm happy to go through in the order, but I'll defer to the group.
Okay.
So I guess that means I'm jumping up. Good times. Yes, so I linked to a proposal in the Slack channel a few days ago. There's been some really great feedback and discussion. Thank you, David. Marcus, I think his name is. Julia gave great feedback as well. Thank you. So there's been like a bunch of editing that I've done to sort of reflect some of that feedback. But the gist of it is coming off the back of the talk, which is that it would be nice to have some way of eliciting expert opinions directly, directly eliciting probabilities, basically, of bad things happening and how bad they are when they happen, and using that to form a ranking system or a ranking overall of software project risk. To do that, there would need to be some effort applied to developing a tool to support that, and also to the operational aspects, how to select experts, how to onboard them, how to train them, how to calibrate them, which is a particular kind of exercise, and so forth. So I explored a lot of that. The thing that's still like I'm uncertain about, but I know that lots of people disagreed with me, is whether to reveal identity of estimators. I'm kind of on the fence about that. And the other one is whether to reveal the ultimate ranking to folks outside of the OpenSSF. So whether to hold the results of the ranking exercise closely or whether to make them public. There was a related question of sharing raw data with researchers. I think that's fine as long as that there are a bunch of guardrails put around it to prevent people from associating estimates with individual experts in public, because we want them to be open and honest with their opinions and not think about what somebody will think about what they think about.
All right. So I think those are excellent questions to ask. So let me briefly pitch. At the very least, I think the results need to be public. And although I'm kind of on the fence, I think actually it makes sense to also have the list of experts public, or at least by pseudonym, if not by real name. For the latter, for the real issues though, final results, let me pitch for that, because that's actually my focus. There's really no way to hide it. We're going to want to take that critical list and focus additional efforts on it. It's going to be really, really hard as a public group to hide what we're focusing on. And frankly, I think it's important for anybody else to know what we're focusing on, because I've already talked to like US government, and I'm expecting the same to be holding for other governments around the world and for other large organizations, which is we are never going to be able to focus on everything. We can focus on some things, but individual organizations are going to need to figure out for themselves what's critical for them. And I'm expecting they're going to especially want to focus on things that no one else is focusing on. And they can't do that if they can't do the set difference and know what we're already focusing on. So I particularly would like to recommend at least the final results need to be public. And I see, I'm sorry, Julie, my eyes are dilated. So I think it's Julia has a hand up.
I always like to do that just so that it's clear I'm actually trying to say something. I agree. I agree with you, David. I think that erring on the side of transparency is good, and allowing people to filter and slice and dice the data in ways that make sense to them is good. De-identifying the expert, I think, is really, really important, because in this day of the internet, harassment is a thing, and so let's not paint targets on anyone's back for saying that a beloved project is, yeah.
Okay, I think I would separate those two. Who are the experts? What did they say?
Right. And I'm on the fence about whether or not to identify the experts themselves. I think that having a database of the experts, like it's important to know who we've talked, who's participating, but releasing that, I'm not sure.
Yes, just to echo, and then we can go to Michael. I do agree with the being transparent as well, because we've run into that before where, you know, a company will come to us and say, you know, we'd love to do security audits. And we're like, okay, well, what do you want to audit? And they're like, we don't want to tell you. And it's like, you know, because not essentially revealing, you know, what you're dependent on or what your critical infrastructure relies on. But I think it can be assumed that a lot of these projects, you know, they are critical. So it doesn't matter which organization you're with, it does apply to you and it is critical to you. And being transparent about that, you know, would be just another way to justify choosing which projects to do and which ones to prioritize. So Michael.
Yeah, just to agree to both of you, I think to state it a different way, the list of experts should be, well, perhaps the list of experts should be public, but how each individual expert votes should not.
Right. Okay. I'm totally in agreement with that statement.
I feel like Julie is not.
No, that's fine. That's fine. But and I actually understand that there can be disagreement on that one.
Well, so here's the thing. I think we have to think about the unintended consequences of publishing that list. There are good consequences, like people can evaluate and point out weaknesses in representation in areas and industries. But there's also harm that can be done. And you have to wonder about the people who will self-select out because their name will be public on a list somewhere.
Is there some sense where I can see two possibilities to try and rescue it as an option to publish things. One would be to make it opt-in, whether your name is public. So you could just refuse to have your details published, and that opt-in, yeah, opt-in. The other one was to make everybody pseudonymous, like assign a pseudonym to every expert. Perhaps reveal some basic biographical data, but we would have to be very careful not to allow de-identification from those details.
Yeah, I think that a good compromise would be to identify area of industry, years of experience, some ranges of these things for the experts without necessarily identifying their name unless they choose to publicly identify that.
Why not just do opt-in, and then those who put their name or at least pseudonyms in, you can look that up, and those who don't, my guess is that most people will put their names in, but you don't think so, Julia?
I think that is a very I think that's a very privileged point of view, to be honest.
Well, I mean, I'm still allowed to have that opinion.
Yeah, I think it would be some mix, right? Like to Julia's point, some people already feel harassed and attacked and don't want to give people another excuse. I think one possibility is that we make the names opt-in. In that case, I would not suggest publishing biographical data, but instead we would collect that data and publish aggregations. 20% of our experts come from finance, 10% identify as underrepresented minorities, etc. Like that's information we do want to publish because we do want people to call us onto the carpet to say you are underrepresenting X, or your pool of experts doesn't cover Y. Does that make sense?
About how many experts are we thinking is,
As many as I can get.
so would thousands be too many?
Well, the limit is probably going to be administrative overhead.
Okay.
Like the difficulty of administering individuals and account resets and people saying I did something wrong, that sort of thing.
Because I guess where I'm going is the larger the pool set size, the less important anyone in particular's opinion is, and therefore it's kind of diluted over the average, which I still get, you know, if for folks that want to opt out or not opt in, great, like it should be fine. Like obviously we need to know who they are. So
Yes.
there does need to be, it can't be completely anonymous.
Yes.
So yeah,
So I think one of the things to bear in mind is that the goal is to a limited extent tell, well, that sounds really, really hard, but it's kind of true, which is to select the next elicitation for the experts. So while we would allow them the freedom to search for projects that they want to, you know, give an opinion for, because they're like, I know about this PHP library and I want to give an opinion about it. When they run out of things that they want to do themselves, we need some scheduling mechanism which basically says, all right, I'm going to reach onto the shelf, pick a project that needs an expert opinion and put it in front of an expert, or possibly several. So it wouldn't be so much that you'd have 1,000 experts all opining on one project. You would be looking to spread those 1,000 so that you might have like 2 or 3 per project over time. And one of the things in the document it says is that when you hit a very high estimate, if something jumps directly into the top, say 200, then that goes pretty much to the front of the list to be re-estimated several times to see if that holds up or whether it's just a fluke. Chris, you had your hand up.
Chris.
Thanks. Yeah, so I guess the question that I would have, and maybe I just need to go through and make sure I've read the whole thing completely clearly, but and again, you know, from the discussion we had the last time, I would have thought that what we're looking at is for something that seems to be an outlier that comes up statistically based on scorecard or whatever the tool, right? And then an expert says, or, you know, somebody who's very familiar with the project, or, you know, somebody that comes and takes a look and says, this doesn't feel right to me. Why is it so highly rated or so lowly rated when I know there's all kinds of crap going on? So it's really much more of a, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily see this as something where you're going through and just like with scorecard, you're actually rating each of the dimensions, but rather you're sort of going in and trying to sort of maybe explain why something shouldn't necessarily be the way that it is. And then that somehow or other is factored into a recalibration for the list. And so I don't necessarily see this as something where, you know, we have, like you said, thousands of people doing this, but are you expecting that everything is gone through this and having some experts take a look at them, or is it just the outliers?
So
The perceived outliers, I should say.
yeah, outliers could be part of the scheduling algorithm. So this is one of the things that's going to be an open question for which I'm not fully qualified to answer, which is that there are many signals that can be used as input into the scheduling algorithm. The problem is that there's a turtles all the way down problem, which is that if we knew which things we should look at first, then we would already have a ranking. So we're relying on secondary signals to say things like, for example, the score given by criticality is very high, and therefore we want to get that looked at quickly to see if that holds true.
Yep.
I think one thing that you're right about is that the most valuable thing we can get from an expert judgment or a collection of expert judgments is surprise, is to be surprised how much it disagrees with the data-driven approach. Those are the ones with the highest value.
I think, yes, absolutely. And so I would have thought, and again, maybe others have different thoughts. I would have thought that it would be much more of a potentially narrative kind of a thing. And yeah, whether or not my preference would be to have it be non-anonymized, because I think sometimes you factor in the credibility of the person who's making the comment into whether or not you think it's justified or carries any merit, any weight. But I would have thought that it would be much more like, I'm not sure that this really should be rated here because X. And then it's a brief narrative, like a short paragraph explaining why the rating is probably not justified.
In the prototype now, it wasn't shown in the demonstration at the conference. There is like a description field or a justification field for that kind of narrative free-form information, because there will be a lot of it and it'll be useful to gather. But I still think we need some transformation into a numerical ranking, which is where it comes back to saying like we need to elicit experts. And then I went through all the options like markets, voting, etc. And that's how I landed on what I landed on.
I will observe, for example, that in Census 2, the Linux kernel is completely not critical because it's not loaded by NPM or by IPI or these sorts of things. And I think part of the challenge is that there's a lot of information that's not, that's not visible in the strictly data-driven approaches.
That's a great point, David, and this is something that I also discovered during my early investigations into critical projects. One of the other areas that people tended to ignore were the tools that people use to develop.
Yes.
So like when I did my analysis, I think that Vim and Emacs came up multiple times, like a ton, because it was installed, they were installed on every single workstation, right? Whether or not they were used. So there's a lot that cannot be captured through a dependency graph.
I wanted to bring up a point that Henri made in the chat, which is that nothing will be able to compare Linux kernel to Google Guava. I disagree. This is broadly the purpose of the approach that's suggested, is to create that commensurability between the different projects. Ultimately, at the end of the day, bad things will happen with some frequency. That's true for both. And when the bad thing is realized, it will have a certain amount of badness. It will have a dollar amount that can be estimated and attached to it. And that's true for both Linux and for Guava. So they are comparable. Like they're not comparable if you're using things like, if you're trying to use like other axes that are, ordinal or nominal or some sort of frame like that, then yes, it's very difficult to get like for like comparisons because they're very different. They're used differently, different audiences, different kinds of development style, etc. And so if you just lined up all the metrics and the settings side by side, you'd just be like, I don't know. So this is why the push is to directly elicit the two values of like, what is the frequency that you think something bad will happen to this project? And when something bad happens, what kind of dollar value do you attach to that? Like, what is the level of loss and destruction that is attached to that event? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure. Because my initial point was that you won't find an expert who can compare Linux kernel to Google Guava, because right, you'll find two experts who both say they're important in each of their own space. And
but that's kind of the advantage, right? Like it doesn't require this is true of markets as well, but it's much less true of voting, is that you don't need coordination between experts to come up with the ranking. Like I don't need to have the single expert who can do both, as I do with, for example, voting. I need each expert to be able to do pairwise comparisons between projects that they might not feel that they can do. But I can say, if you're familiar with this, or if you want to give an estimate for this, then you can, and that's directly commensurable with estimates given on other projects by their experts.
And they are commensurate if the question is, where do we put our limited resources in to improve those various projects? So
I guess the bit I'm struggling on it, and like using Google Guava, I guess using was it log kit, maybe like whatever's the top item in the Harvard item, it feels like we're going to end up with a whole bunch of buckets and we're going to have a bunch of top items in each bucket. But the ability to be able to put a dollar value on the impact of a Linux kernel security issue and the impact of a Log4j security issue both feel like they become the industry big and lots. And any of those kind of estimates just become an exercise in inventing a big number based on, you know, not good enough data because you can't really see everything. And
yes, this is a problem we have. If we can't access to those leading indicators of loss and destruction, then we could just use them. Right, we just create a econometric or machine learning model. Yeah, so that's kind of the circle we keep going in. Is just like we don't have all the data that we wish we had, so we need expert opinion.
And I guess the bit I'm trying to get to, and I'm in morning mode, right? Like brain is still speeding up. I don't think experts, like, we're never going to solve that one at those high levels. We're totally going to get an ability to understand within the PHP space, these are bigger than these ones, and our automated findings discovered some odd things because of one of them moved to a different repo. So actually it's in two separate repos and therefore didn't get added together properly in the analysis. So we'll get that. And then we'll therefore obviously, I think, have a good feel between obscure PHP library versus really popular Perl library. And there'll be a good feeling, yes, we've suitably calibrated the two and we can compare across. But I think it's going to be tricky to compare across when you're at the upper end or even the lower end of each one, right? We're going to get a magnitude within a bucket.
I'm not sure I agree, but I see that David is waiting to ask a question.
I was just going to say, I mean, it seemed, I don't know which day. I mean, it seems that we're, or at least I think the concern from Henry was that we're trying to create this, uniform sorting. I mean, which I agree. I mean, I think it's impossible, but I don't think that that's what anybody's proposing. I mean, it
is what I'm proposing. It is literally what I'm proposing is to create a single ranking.
Okay, then I guess I agree with Henry. That's impossible.
And I disagree with Henry. I think it is.
No, I mean, I think that it's possible to say with fungibility of, let's say, money, that we can say this is important or that's important. And we can say, so maybe if you're saying in using this other intermediate representation of, I mean, money in terms of business impact, I mean, how much of the world is going to, explode if this happens. And okay, we can say with that, but maybe I guess this is sort of a, pedantic, maybe this is what Henry's talking about, that's translating everything into this other ranking system of money, which we can say we can apply to all these different projects, but that's separate from saying we're going to rank the importance of these projects inherently and technically, and that's what sort of other than the financial. So
yeah, that's true. Like, I don't think that there is I'll finish this comment and then I'll let you go. I don't think that there's this is sort of like an economic question, like the concept of inherent value versus subjective value. I don't think that there is, so to speak, an inherent value that can be sorted. That's why we're forced back to the subjective value. What would somebody pay for it, or what do we estimate somebody would pay for it or cost in dollar terms? Because those are commensurable across projects versus other things we can come up with, which would not be, because there's just so much variegation in open source. And yeah.
Yes. What I was going to say is, in interest of kind of my objective of kind of getting an MVP of kind of this process going, if the work group would like to keep talking about this topic, please, let's do it. It's a very important topic. In the context of generating a list of projects, we started kind of working on this process for doing that. And after looking at the document, let me share this document again with everybody. I would like to, if we can set some time for it, spend some time working on the first phase of kind of getting a list of projects, which I think is going to be essentially having an ingestion engine or something where we can generate a list and have a list of projects that we at least identify, and then prioritize from that list, kind of using this expert, seeking expert opinion and prioritization and what have you. So I definitely don't want to derail this great conversation happening. I just, I'm kind of operating on the constraints that, I would really love to have at least something that we can iterate
Yes.
on and work on. So I'll offer the floor to Julia and David and Chris, who had their hands up after me in regards to this discussion. But I'd love to move forward with kind of that process for getting stuff on paper that we can chop down and prioritize. But with that, I'd love to hear from Julia, David, and Chris.
Is it okay if I jump in for a second, Julia?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. Yes.
I think for the moment, yes, we need to stick with the ad hocratic methods that we've used up to this point, simply because it will take time to develop the tooling and to develop the administrative muscle. And I admit that we need stuff sooner than that. So, I'm perfectly comfortable with that. I don't see them as mutually exclusive.
Okay.
Thanks,
Great.
Julia.
Yeah, and to that point, let's drive multiple work streams, right? We don't have to do one after the other. So I think that to Jacques' point, we can still achieve phase one while developing a system to seek expert opinions. The thing that I just wanted to emphasize in terms of comparing projects is that I'm really trying to avoid an analogy that I don't want to make right now, but there's the reason that you seek out expert opinion on things is because people have knowledge that cannot be captured in data. And figuring out how to capture that in a way that can be incorporated into a data-driven system is the challenge. And the SEER proposal is one approach. But I also think that we should explore doing a kind of the categorized approach as well, so that we can compare like-ish to like-ish, but still arrive at one list at the end. And I think that's a framework problem. It's not a tooling problem. Jacques looks very perplexed. That's all I'm going to say.
I do that a lot.
I think I'm next.
Yes, David.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if a lot of this is conflating value and cost. I mean, maybe this is not. It's a problem I often say. I'm wondering, people have great value, but I'm going to pay them a certain amount for a salary. So is the Linux kernel valuable? Yes. Is Google Guava valuable? Yes. But in the end, we have limited resources. So I think we need to find a way to make a list, not because we don't care about other projects, but because we only have limited resources, and we need to find a way to focus on some things first in some sort of rational way. And that's really all this is about in my mind. We're not making a value judgment. We're simply trying to identify what do we want to focus on first. And that's it. It's not a value judgment on whether or not a project's important or whether we like the people. It's just we got to figure out where the limited resources go to start with.
Thank you, David. Chris?
Yeah, so how do I say this? I said in the chat, and I'll say it again, I think context matters. And having there, there is no getting to a single list without taking context into consideration. Again, within the context of Node, nobody gives a crap about Log4j. And why would they invest any of their precious resources to go and help improve Log4j? And conversely, why are people who are focusing on Go or Rust going to focus on something wrong with Log4j? So my point is, I think a list is going to be relevant in the eye of the beholder, or in the context of where am I going to put my money? Now, David, maybe this is where I don't really understand how the funds are supposed to be operated, but it would seem to me that if I were a company that invested very heavily in sort of a Node or a Java or a Go or a Rust or whatever sort of ecosystem for the software that I produce and consume, that's where I would want my money to go. And so, that's why I think I said, way back when, I'm not sure that, we're ever going to get to a point where we can all agree on where the money should go, but the crowdsourced approach to things would be a little bit easier to address, where people could then go through and say, here are some of the things that I care about. Now show me a list that's reflective of my interests, my concerns. And that would be a singular list, but it's in my perspective of that, as opposed to, trying to come up with the global God view of what the priorities are, because I don't think we're ever going to get to that.
I don't agree with that last part, but I think David Edelson's ahead of me.
Yeah, I was just going to say, continue on that great comment from Chris. At least from a fundraising perspective, or what I know from some of these other things, donors like to have, a menu to select from. They really want to say, okay, you can go to some people and say, we're just doing, good things for the world and just give us general, but some, big donors say, I care about this and I want to, do about, this thing in Africa or this thing in there, or, this thing in, healthcare here, so I think we need to take both approaches. So, I think it's a matter of, we can definitely go with the OpenSSF and say, okay, here are some general things going on, and, motherhood, apple pie, this is good, we need to do these things. For, Amir and, to sort of get this list, which I completely agree with. I'm just suggesting to have an open mind about this, or to, take this, broader view of both of these, that, okay, we have general funds in the LF and the OpenSSF that we're going to apply to projects and a whole we think are good for the community, and big donors want to work on that. But there also will be, and we can sort of trade off. In other words, if we have a donor who says, well, I really want to work on this. This is what I've seen with bounties versus many other things I've been working on as well, is that you can play this game, internal versus external funds at IBM. So in other words, you could go to these, have this big pool of funds and say, okay, here's our list, but you can do is, well, I really only care about, Java stuff, or I only really care about Node. Okay, well, now we can take your money. It's a little bit more complicated, it's balancing, but say, okay, we're going to invest your money in the Java stuff, but that then allows us to free up the general funds that we're going to have to spread everywhere, and we can now put that somewhere else that we think is important. So, balancing out the way we're doing the fundraising with this priority, that to be able to, accommodate donors who want to be able to, have this Chinese menu and, mix and mash and pick, the pieces that they want, and we can get the most out of all of these funders and the most funds and address the most projects.
So I think I'm next. I had a point which I think is at least consonant with David E's, a slightly different view, but I think we end up in the same place. When particular governments or large organizations have asked me what's critical, the obvious answer to me is you have to figure out what's critical for you. However, as you get larger and larger, first of all, bigger organizations and governments, and particularly if governments are looking not just for themselves, but for their constituents, their society, good luck. I'll use the U.S. government as an example because I'm more familiar with them. The U.S. government really has no idea what's in a whole lot of those critical infrastructures, and certainly not what everyone is implementing on every website in the entire United States, or even more, what U.S. citizens depend on, which is frankly global. They're never going to get that either. And what's more, I think that if we unioned a lot of the different organizations, clearly Shopify is going to have a different set of interests, than Microsoft. If you look and say, hey, are they identical? But I think we're also expecting, as soon as you look at a lot of lists, there's going to be a lot of overlap. Linux kernel is going to show up in a lot of places. Lots of other things are going to show up in a lot of places. And so if we can focus on the things that show up in a lot of places, we make it a lot easier for those folks who are going to also identify the specific items by helping get rid of broad challenges. So I don't see the two in conflict. I think I see them as supportive.
Okay, so some very good points came up just now, and I think it would make sense to tackle it as a group and do a consensus on this. So in that document for the process for identifying and curating a list, I added a new section, reasoning for list, or I want us to capture, like you said, who is the audience, what is the goal of this, what are we trying to do? And I would love to work on that as a group to kind of come up with that.
Yeah, please feel free to suggest text. I mean, it's set to suggestion at the moment because it's in the Shopify G drive because we couldn't find a bucket.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of, can we create a bucket?
I'm sorry?
Can we create a shared folder that we can all use?
Yeah, we have that for some other groups, which is really helpful. I would have started the document in one of those folders if I knew what it was or where it was.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So help me understand the intended plan. So it sounds like, Jacques, you think that it's not going to be, because of time limits and folks want to get some list out done by late summer this year. The idea is to improve and apply the process for identifying critical projects. I would call that a list number 2, because we already have a list. And then the idea would be maybe use this SEER approach for list number 3 or version 3. I mean, maybe we should call them Rev 3. Is
Right.
that kind of what you have in mind as what?
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody's agreed to that, but is that what you had in mind anyway?
I see it. Yeah, it's like your 3 or your 4. It's a generational 2 down the road. Simply because we do need some input for Alpha Omega and others sooner than it would be possible to stand this up as a production system. And as I said, make sure that we understand what administrative overhead may be involved, because that'll affect LF staff most likely. And we've got to be cognizant of the LF, the OpenSSF staff workload. I can see one possibility where we release editions of the list, whether it's live or whether we like once a quarter or twice a year or something, take a snapshot of it and say, this is the list for summer 2023. I don't know. That makes it easier for people to reason about who are consuming, like they don't have to deal with the list changing constantly. I'm not sure if that's what you were driving at or whether I've gone off on a tangent.
That certainly helps me.
Okay.
Yeah. I was thinking something very similar where we have a process where basically it's like we throw a bunch of stuff up on the wall, capture a bunch of projects, because as we were talking about, capturing those outliers and some of those other projects is going to require that we get a diverse opinions. So we get a bunch of stuff up on the wall, and then there's a process for categorizing and prioritizing that, which would, I believe, include your the SEER process as part of that. so does that sound like we're in general consensus kind of on that kind of strategy or strategic plan? And part of that will be, I will create some like a folder that everyone who's a part of the work group can easily access, because that's been helpful, I would say. I mean, like for the document I created for us for the process, I just added the work group to the document to be able to edit it. So that way we can be a little more consistent. But in general, do we feel good about kind of where we're headed with this, and kind of what needs to be done in order to have something by end of summer?
For end of summer, I think a more ad hoc approach will be necessary, just because SEA would not be ready in that time.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're just, the key is to have a MVP, out,
Yeah.
or something out that we can say, hey, this is what we did. Yeah.
I guess one thing I want to take back with me is, would we be like committing at least to taking SEA to TAC, say this is something we would like to get a blessing for as a project? Like we as a working group ourselves can spin up projects, in my understanding of the draft governance framework, but it's still only a draft. So de facto, we have to sort of go to TAC and say, hey, we're doing this thing, we hope you like it. The reason for that being, in turn, that people will need to work on this, right? All of us have things to do. And for me to go back to my management and say, I want us to work on this, but nobody has done anything on paper that says that they'll accept it, is difficult. So I'd be looking for some sort of, ideally, TAC blessing for the approach or for the idea, which means, with that itself will probably push it out to the end of summer, because people got to read the document, they've got to discuss it, go through the questions that we went through today, that sort of thing. But I want at least, I guess, a vibe that people are or are not in favor of pursuing this approach, so that I can at least, tee up the conversations with my management that, like, hey, I'm going to want to try and chisel some people off the head count to work on this.
My 2 cents on that is that if you feel that it's something that we can implement into this process, and something that we can use to fulfill this goal, then absolutely. My biggest focus, of course, is having something that we can iterate on.
Can you create an estimate of what it would cost? I mean, if you're asking for funding, then the process is pretty straightforward. Create a proposal, hopefully make some sense. Got to have a dollar figure, raise it to the TAC. And in the end, it's the governing board, but the governing board always wants to hear the TAC's opinion first.
Yeah. Speaking tactically, it will probably be easier for me to get headcount inside Shopify than to shake money.
Okay.
And it also, like I would be looking for a time box commitment from my management to say, like, off the top of my head, I would think of this in terms of myself plus another pair. And I'd be saying, like, myself being part-time, because I got a lot of stuff going on. And saying, like, can I have them for 6 months, or can I have them for a year, and see how far we get, and hopefully, start to attract contributors from other participants in the OpenSSF. So it's not just Shopify. So we don't have a risk of a reliance on one participant.
I mean, my hope would be that we work on a minimum viable product, and it wouldn't take too long. But that's kind of what
I don't think it would take like super long. Right? It's just that the devil is in the details, as we've discovered today. There's like the big feature, which I've already got in the prototype, which is like doing the Monte Carlo, and that's the shiny, exciting thing that you talk at conferences about. But then there's all the tiny details of, like, the permissions have to be right, so who can see what at what times, and how does the ranking get published, and like all these minute details, which is like, you've all heard the joke that the first 90% of the project takes 90% of the time, the last 10% takes the other 90% of the time, and it's the other 90% I worry about.
Got it. It sounds like you're looking for more of a commitment that, yes, we think this is the right way to go. And I don't think everybody here has had time to review it yet.
I'm
So,
patient. I'm,
yeah.
you know, as I said in the conference talk, like we're talking about the prioritization of trillions of dollars of risk exposure worldwide. So it's fine to take a minute or two to scratch our heads.
Yeah. I will commend Jock's talk, and we're going to try to get that up as soon as we can, because I think that would be, I thought it was a very good way of expressing the options and the pros and cons, which I think is the right way to think through a hard decision anyway.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Oh,
And
we're running out of time.
we are, yes, as we always do, because we have great discussions. I will say, I think for the next meeting, which is on the 14th of July, we can prioritize taking a stab at ingestion engine kind of list, identified project list generation, basically, and talk about that a little bit in more detail, since we didn't get to it today.
Okay.
And then I understand we do still need to make some movement on doing either every other, or maybe, you know, once every couple of meetings to be APAC friendly time zones. So we are still working on that. Because thinking about, I don't know if it makes sense to alternate where, you know, every other meeting we would have it at the APAC friendly time zone. That might be easier in terms of consistency, but I know, for example, this hour is blocked off for me now because I've been in meetings for some time. So I don't know if changing that will affect attendance, if having like regularly different meetings. Does anyone have any particular way about that, or have any thoughts on what might work best for accommodating different time zones?
So,
Oh, Julie, go ahead. I've talked a lot.
oh, I was just going to say, the only reason I was able to make this meeting is because my other meeting was canceled. So generally, I would say alternating mornings and late afternoon. It is a good way to set it up regularly, and is what I've done for other working groups. It will impact attendance. Like, that's just something that we're going to have to be okay with. But it also means we're going to get people that we wouldn't otherwise. So
yeah. And it looks like I'm looking at kind of the communal calendar. It looks like on certain Thursdays there is a 3 p.m. scorecards all-star bi-weekly meeting. So I would just want to make sure we don't overlap with that one, and maybe just go after 4 p.m., which I think would work for the APAC folks and wouldn't overlap the scorecards meeting.
4 p.m. in which time zone?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I forget. 4 p.m. in my time, which is Central Time
Okay.
zone.
All right. Yep, that's
So,
good.
It just kind of, would that work in general for 4 p.m. Central Time for alternating? That would be, that'd be a little late for the East Coast folks. That'd be 5 p.m. and then 2 p.m. for the West Coast folks.
I had a 6 p.m. repositories meeting yesterday, so it's par for it. You know, it's there is no perfect time zone. It's par for the course.
Indeed, yeah. Okay. So then I think that solves that. So I'll reach out to Jory, and hopefully in one of our upcoming meetings, I don't know if it'll maybe starting after the 14th, we will alternate to APAC friendly time.
Sounds good.
Awesome. I'm glad we were able to solve that. Yeah, sadly, there are only 2 minutes left. If there are any kind of last minute thoughts, I'd love to hear from anyone who didn't get a chance to maybe say something they wanted to today, but great discussion. And as always, thank you all so much. Do we have any closing thoughts from anyone?
Oh, thanks, everyone. Good conversation.
I think we should close with a dad joke.
Yes, Julia, I couldn't agree more. Can you see us off?
Let me pull up the API. No, I got nothing.
All right.
I'm sorry.
All right, Dad, do you have a good one for us?
Let's see here. I just heard, how do you spice up an algorithm? You add a Boolean cube.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
That's a great one.
I
So
love
I'm
it.
here to provide.
Yes, ending on a smile, on a laugh. Thank you so
Ba-dum-bum.
much. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great 4th for everyone celebrating, and see you all soon.
All right, take care.
Bye.